Testing. 1, 2, 3. And now, a haiku. It's creepy in here. This ship is talking to me. I want off this ship. How you guys doing? My name is Zoe. That's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Thank you for joining us for the 137th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast. We really appreciate it. We watched the movies of yesteryear that we loved from the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that spooky demon-possessed spaceship. You might as well, because it can definitely hear you. Now, as you might have guessed, the movie that I want to talk about is Event Horizon. And the thing about this movie is that it is a movie that I had always wanted to see, but never got around to seeing. So this is one of those unusual episodes where I'm going to talk about one of the movies that I should have watched. Or maybe I should think of it as, should I have watched this movie? I don't know. I'm still kind of thinking of what I'm going to call this experience. But that's kind of the gist of it. I just want to go back and watch some of the movies that came out in the 90s that were all the rage at the time that I just didn't get around to watching. And Event Horizon was one of those movies. It certainly had a lot of buzz around it when it was coming out. I do remember a lot of the advertisements for it. It looked very enticing, even though horror is not my thing. I remember there was a kind of ad thing going on where you had Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne, and they were just, they weren't doing a junket. They were doing like a special type of advertisement talking about the movie. And it was a type of advertisement where they were intentionally trying to creep you out. It was a unique type of thing that they were doing. And I like Lawrence Fishburne and I like Sam Neill. And it's a movie that I feel like I probably should have made an effort to watch, and I just never got around to going out and watching it. So I watched it for the first time yesterday, and now I get to talk about it. So let's get into the opening credits. In the year 2047, the crew of the T-class rescue vessel, the USAC Lewis Clark, was none too pleased when their well-deserved shore leave was canceled, and they were ordered to engage in an emergency top-secret rescue mission. Their surprise guest on this mission was Dr. William Ware, and their destination was a ship that was long thought to be lost. The sudden reappearance of this ship became the top priority of the U.S. Aerospace Command. The mysterious ship now holds secrets and awaits the crew of the Lewis and Clark to satisfy their curiosity. It is a ship called the Event Horizon. Released August 15th, 1997, produced by Paramount Pictures, Kolar Productions, and Impact Pictures, it grossed over $26 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $60 million. Now, to put that in the context, in today's dollars, that would be that it grossed $50 million on a budget of $116 million. If you do rudimentary math, you can see that this movie was a flop at the box office when it was released. And I think I'm a little bit surprised at that. I kind of knew that the movie didn't do well, but it did extremely poorly. It did worse. But it still has a cult following. There are a lot of people that still enjoy this film, a lot of people that watch it or go back and rewatch it and have a grand time with it. So this is what you would call a cult classic. This cult classic stars Lawrence Fishburne as Captain Miller. You may have remembered him from The Matrix, Othello, Apocalypse Now, Boys in the Hood, or John Wick. There are so many great movies that he was in. I was just going through all the movies that I remember seeing him in and really enjoyed. Then there's Sam Neill. He played Dr. William Ware. And you probably most remember him from Jurassic Park, but he's also been in The Hunt for Red October that we covered in episode 2. And then there's another hunt that he was on, Hunt for the Weirder People, or it might be Hunt for the Wilder People. I'm not exactly sure how that's pronounced. And then there's Kathleen Quinlan. She was the medical tech Lieutenant Peters. She's also been in Apollo 13 that we covered in episode 112. She's also in the movie Breakdown and The Doors. Jolie Richardson, she plays Executive Officer Lieutenant Stark. It's spelled Starck. You may have seen her in The Patriot, the live-action 101 Dalmatians that came out in 1996, and another movie, Thanks for Sharing. Then there's one of my favorite guys, Richard T. Jones. He played Rescue Tech Lieutenant Cooper. He's been in Vantage Point, Phone Booth, and Super 8. We have Jack Noseworthy. He played Engineer Officer Lieutenant Justin. He's been in Alive, The Hacks, and Breaking Brooklyn. And then another great actor, Jason Isaacs. He played Medical Officer Lieutenant Commander DJ. He's been in the Harry Potter films, specifically Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Fury, and Dragonheart. Also, he's done a ton of voice work, and the last thing I've seen him on is Star Trek Discovery in the first season. Lastly, we have Sean Pertwee. The funny thing about seeing this actor is, like, when I saw him, I immediately recognized him, but I did not know where I knew him from. He played the pilot Lieutenant Smith. And then when I looked him up on Wikipedia to see the projects that he was in, the first thing, not Wikipedia, I'm sorry, IMDb, the first thing that jumped up was Equilibrium. And I was like, that's where I saw him. That's where I remember him from. And we covered Equilibrium in episode 94. But the other thing that I remember him, the reason that he's so familiar is that he was in Gotham as Alfred. And, it's funny how he looked so familiar, but I couldn't remember that he was on every episode of the show that I watched. I think I only lasted like 3 seasons in Gotham, but he was on most of those shows. So I should have remembered him right away, but did not. Memory is funny that way. And you may have also seen him in a movie called Dog Soldiers. I heard people talk about this. I won't be watching that one. This movie was directed by the legendary Paul W.S. Anderson. He's directed many of my favorite movies, and a lot of times when I list the movies that directors have made, a lot of the movies that they've made I haven't actually seen, but Anderson hasn't made a lot of movies. I think it's only like 15 or 16 or something like that. And I listed my favorites that he's done. Mortal Kombat, Soldier, Resident Evil. Yes, I liked Resident Evil. I also liked Alien versus Predator, and I also liked the new Death Race that the Death Race remake that he made. This movie was written by Philip Eisner. He does not have a ton of credits in all of the things that he's done, producing and writing, and the other things that he's done. He doesn't have a ton of credits. So you may have seen Sweet Girl, or you may have seen Mutant Chronicles. Then these are the movies that he's written besides the one that we're talking about. But otherwise, it's hard to find anything else about him. But he was definitely passionate about this particular movie. The music is by Michael Kamen. Now, Paul Anderson wanted to use the band Orbital because he worked with them on Mortal Kombat, but Paramount didn't want to use an unknown band on a big feature film. So Kamen was chosen to compose the music, but Kamen collaborated with Orbital to create the unique Sith-influenced soundtrack for the movie. And it did its job. It was just the right amount of creepy music that you would expect in a horror movie. Also, he's done music for The Dead Zone, Brazil, Life Force, Highlander, and Lethal Weapon. And we're kind of at the point where I've talked about Michael Kamen so much that I'm just writing down his credits over and over again. So that's it for the opening credits. I don't really have any announcements, so we're going to head right on into my top 5 favorite parts for Event Horizon. Now, actually, I do try to limit my favorite parts of the movie to just 5 things because I don't want to go rambling on and on. But at the same time, the thing about it is that this movie was not as thoroughly entertaining as I hoped that it would be. It starts off a little slow, and I didn't feel like the tension was properly ratcheted up. So as a result, there was a lot of nothing going on in this movie, but there were some parts that I could pick out that were really good. So I'm just going to pick out all of these parts. I'm going to pick the fruit of this movie. I'm going to turn lemon into lemonade. So one of the things I really liked about this movie is the look and feel of the tech in this movie. That it looks very analog, all of the tech that's used in this movie. So the look and feel of the USAC Lewis and Clark and the Event Horizon itself, just properly, both of the ships were creepy. Like, I feel like the Lewis and Clark was needlessly creepy. Like, I feel like there should be a portion of the movie that, I don't know, looks clean. There was a portion where you see Dr. Weir and he's on the space station and that looks clean. But I feel like the Lewis and Clark, I guess being a military vessel, that should have had maybe a clean, maybe a lighter feel to it. I think that it would have worked if it looked like a safe place, like a welcoming place. Instead, it was kind of bulky, I guess. I mean, I like the look of it, but I feel like maybe it should have been the opposite of what the Event Horizon looked like. And the Event Horizon was all dark and creepy and gothic, and it looked like a church in reverse, or it looked like if a church had thrown up and it threw up technology. That's kind of what it looked like. And I think that's what they were going for. And if, maybe all I really needed was for the Lewis and Clark to have a different color scheme, but it still looked good. I still enjoyed it, but I think that it would have helped me with the tension if it looked safer, or if it were more cozy in some kind of way. But moving right along, I really liked the skipper, Captain Miller. It gave me a lot of Morbius vibes. So that's Lawrence Fishburne. And I feel like if you look at this character, you also see Morpheus. And I really liked that. He was confident, he was commanding, he was in charge, and he was a lot gruffier than most other space captains in any sci-fi genre that you might think of. Yeah, he's just a gruff captain that you're not used to seeing in sci-fi. And I kind of enjoy the way it was played. My next favorite thing was strangely enough, it was kind of the mission briefing. And the reason I want to say the mission briefing is because this is where I felt the tension was kind of ratcheting up just a little bit, because they're dealing with trying to find a mysterious object, because the crew were pulled off of their leave, their vacation. They were supposed to be, there was actually one of the crew members was supposed to be going home so that she could visit her son. I guess her and her husband had a divorce and they had to share custody of her son or daughter. I can't remember, her offspring, one of them. And, the captain had gone over and told her, like, he really tried to switch her out, but because of how this was like an emergency mission, he wasn't able to get her off the ship. So the crew is wondering what the big deal is. Why were their lives basically disturbed to go on this mission? What's the hubbub all about? And everything was kept on the hush hush. So nobody really knows what they're doing. They're a rescue ship, so they're going to be rescuing something. But what is the nature of it? And so there comes a scene where Dr. Weir is at liberty to expound upon what the mission is. It's basically an exposition. It's an info dump, but it's done so well because like you're sitting there as an audience member, it's like, what are we doing? What's going on? Give us the info. Let us know, clue us in on what the deal is. And so I did enjoy that. I for some reason that tickled me pink. I know there are a lot of people that don't truly enjoy expositions, but I think that a well done exposition can be entertaining. The next thing I really liked was there's a part where Smith, the pilot, he kind of loses his shit and he tries to fight Dr. Weir. I think it's because Dr. Weir said they want to leave. Like when they get to the event horizon, it's either before they get there or when they get there. The crew wants to leave immediately. Like they don't want to stay there. And Dr. Weir says, no, we can't leave. We have to do this. We have to do this mission. You can't leave. It's like these are, it's basically higher than all of our pay grades or something like that. And Smith wants to fight him and the crew has to break them apart. So I like that part because Smith is a kind of no nonsense character. He's by the numbers, no nonsense, knows his job, and he knows when something isn't right. And he sensed that something wasn't right at that moment, and he wanted to fight Dr. Weir over it. And then later on in the movie, there's lots of adventures. Obviously, the event horizon is a creepy ship. Like the ship is essentially, it's been described as a haunted house in space. So they're on this creepy space, this creepy haunted spaceship, and they're seeing visions. And some of the crew members are seeing, and basically what the visions do is that some of the visions trick them into having an accident. So, for example, the woman that wanted to see her son, she kept seeing him on the ship. And this is like when they're about to depart the event horizon, they're convinced that there's obviously people are seeing visions. and somehow the so-called drive, the heart of the ship, the main component is some kind of black hole drive. So it's or they call it a singularity. So the singularity is like just coming on by itself. And it basically puts one of the crew members in a catatonic state. And so the crew members understandably want to get off the event horizon and just abandon the ship. And so during this abandonment, one of the crew members, I think it's Peters, she starts to see her son just kind of walking around the ship, or daughter. I can't remember if it was her son or her daughter, but she starts chasing this child across the ship. And then, and it's one of those things where, she sees the child and then the child disappears and she's trying to go to the last place she saw him. And then they're in this one area where he kind of peeks up and she sees the child, and then he kind of beckons her to come forward, and she starts to go to him, and she falls down a hole that she wasn't paying attention to because she was so focused on this illusion that she was seeing. And she falls down this hole and she is killed from the fall. And so you have that is how this ship is affecting the crew. So the crew is trying to get off this ship. There's another incident where you had one of the crew members, the engineer, he was the one that touched I guess he touched the singularity of the drive, and then that kind of pulled him in and then pushed him out. And then, when he was able to escape the singularity, he was in a catatonic state, like he couldn't talk or he couldn't communicate or whatever. They had to get him into like a medical pod or whatever. And then and closed and locked himself on one side of the airlock, and he was speaking nonsense. The crew didn't know what he was talking about. And then at the last, like just before the outer doors of the airlock opened, he regained himself. It's like his mind came back to him, and then he was trying to get out of the airlock, but he had already activated the outer door, so the airlock started to open. But he was rescued by the captain, who happened to be on the outside, pushed him back into the spaceship, and it was able to close both doors of the airlock. It was a lot of this kind of stuff happened. Just people seeing visions, people getting killed. You had one impressive scene was you had DJ, the medical doctor, and he got hooked on, he was in a bad way. Let's just put it that way. He was also murdered, and he got put in a bad way. So, and all of these things, and at this point, the Dr. Weir had gone crazy. It's like he was fully possessed by the ship now. He had these, how do I say this? Somehow he poked out his own eyeball. So he's walking around, his eyes are open, but there's just bloody pulps inside where his eyes are supposed to be. I'm sorry to be so graphic, but this is a horror movie. So he's walking around kind of terrorizing the crew. And then, at one point he's on an event horizon, and then at another point you see him and he's on the Lewis and Clark, and the crew is coming back to the Lewis and Clark, and the pilot sees Dr. Weir, like he sees the back of his head as he walks off the Lewis and Clark. But since everybody is supposed to be leaving, he chases down Dr. Weir, or he tries to, but he loses track of him. And then that's when the captain realizes that Dr. Weir has planted explosives on the Lewis and Clark, and he tries to warn the crew to get off. What crew that were able to get on the Lewis and Clark. So at this point, it's just the pilot, and because they were repairing the Lewis and Clark, and the other guy, the rescue tech. I think his name is Cooper. I'm going to look his name up real quick. I've got the thing right in front of me. Yeah, his name is Cooper. So it's just Cooper and I think the pilot, Lieutenant Smith, that are on the Lewis and Clark, and so he's warned by the captain to get off the ship because there's an explosive on it. But instead of actually getting off, he's looking, because I guess because he doesn't really think he has time to get off the ship, so he's looking for the explosive, and then he finally finds it. But then it's on a timer, and it's like got 2 seconds left. And then, he's got that expression like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then the thing blows up, and it's a powerful explosive. So it completely destroys the Lewis and Clark, and Cooper's on the outside of the ship. So he gets caught in the blast, but it just pushes him away from the whole event horizon and everything. So he's fortunate because his suit isn't damaged or anything. He's in a spacesuit, obviously. He's on the outside of the ship, and he's hanging on a piece of wreckage that is basically pushing him away from the event horizon. So the blowing up of the ship is what I'm trying to say is one of my favorite parts. And I would just wanted to explain the things that kind of led up to it, because I skipped a lot of things. So I had also mentioned the doc's death. I don't want to describe the doc's death, but yeah, he died in a bad way. But that is worth noting. And finally, there's Miller's sacrifice. So at this point, most of the crew is dead. He was able to rescue his XO. And so the XO happens to be, I guess, she's the final girl in this movie. And that was Stark, Lieutenant Stark. So he was able to rescue her. He was able to rescue, I think he was able to rescue the engineer. And they also rescued Cooper. So they're on the event horizon. They're in the center of it, where they have the pods, where they have to get into the pods in order to engage in space travel. They develop a plan where the event horizon has a sequence where it's basically got there are two parts of the hull that are connected by a small tunnel. So there's a bulb at the front that's the head of the ship. There's a long tunnel, and then there's a giant back portion, the engine part of the ship, where the heart of the event horizon is. That's where the singularity drive is. That's the thing that causes the ship to go through dimensions and whatnot. So this long tunnel was designed with a failsafe where if the crew ran into any problems, they would blow up the tunnel, and then the front part of the ship would act as a lifeboat. And then they could, with a limited amount of maneuverability, they can drift in space with a rescue beacon on and wait for the crew from, the government to rescue them or something like that. So that's the idea that Miller gets. Miller's like, that is what we're going to do to get away from the event horizon, or at least get away from the part of the event horizon that's causing all these problems, which they're determined is the black hole or the singularity that's at the heart of the ship. Now, the thing about, I guess I should explain this if you hadn't seen the movie. So the ship is an experimental ship. What made it so special was that it was like at this time, there is no faster than light travel. Everybody's going at normal speeds through space. The fastest they can go is like relativistic speeds. They can go really fast because they go from Earth to Neptune in 56 days, I think. And that is very fast. But it's so fast that they have to go in these special gravity pods so that their bodies aren't squished because of the incredible acceleration that these spaceships are capable of. But they're not capable of faster than light travel. It's faster than light travel. So what Dr. Weir was able to figure out is that he was able to figure out how to create a wormhole in space by using a singularity or a black hole. That's why the ship is called the event horizon. That's the part of the black hole that's the point of no return. And so using this, he can create 2 points in space and go anywhere in the universe instantaneously. But the thing with the event horizon is that during its test, when it activated the singularity or the black hole, the ship went to another dimension and disappeared for 7 years. And then when it finally came back, the crew was dead, the crew was gone. That's why the Lewis and Clark was sent to investigate. So that's the meat and potatoes of the movie. So the thing about it is, they're seeing these hellish visions. They're seeing, and then they see these recordings, like they got the ship's logs, and it's basically a bunch of debauchery, people eating other people. It's pretty gross. I'll read you the trivia when I talk about the audience reaction or the test audience reaction and the studio reaction to this type of scenery. But basically they're slowly convinced that what they're seeing is visions of hell. So that's the plan is to blow up the I guess the tunnel, or it's not a tunnel, it's a hallway or a tube, the tube that connects the other portions of the ship, blow that up and escape on the lifeboat. So you have Dr. Neil. He's totally possessed now. He's got scars on his face. He's got missing eyeballs. He's basically fighting with the crew. And it's the captain's decision to allow the other people to get into their pods or to stay safe in the lifeboat section. And he's going to go down to activate the explosives. The explosives are along the long connecting tunnel. So he's activating these explosives. And then at the end of the tunnel, there's the special activation device, the actuator, right, where it's a remote control where he presses the button and it blows up the tunnel and it sets the lifeboat free from the drive section. and he's close to the drive section. What he wanted to do, what the plan was to activate these explosions and then run back to the lifeboat and then set off the explosion so he can escape with his crew. But the problem is, in this sequence, he has a vision, and he's haunted by the memory of when he had allowed one of his crew members to die. This man was burnt alive, and it's like he's haunted by this, and he's always tried to run a ship where he didn't lose any of his crew members. So suddenly this man appears. He's burning. He's blaming the captain, like, you did this to me. I'm burning because of you, or whatever. This is what they do in horror movies. And so now he has to get away, because even though it's kind of a vision, it's a man that's burning, and this man can hurt him. It's like a solid thing. It's like a real thing. It's a vision come to life, and it's attacking him. And it's like he has to escape this burning man. And so he ends up in the drive section where the singularity is. So he's in there, and he, when he's talking to the thing, he's like, I know that, like, you're not real. I know that you're just, cause the man that I lost, I know that he's dead and you're not a real thing. And then the man on fire, he transforms, and it's Dr. Weir, and Dr. Weir continues to attack him, and it's like he has to fight Dr. Weir. And this is where he realized that, like, Dr. Weir now has superhuman strength, and he's not going to beat Dr. Weir. So this is where he blows up the tube, and he sacrifices himself so that his crew can escape. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that sacrifice. It was a long way to go to, it was a long way to discuss one of my favorite parts of the movie, but I did it. I was able to get it out. So those are my favorite parts of Event Horizon. So let's go on to the next section, the top 10 trivia. All right, so let's get into some trivia, that juicy trivia from IMDb. So up first, Paul W.S. Anderson's initial cut of the film ran 130 minutes and was so violent that both test audiences and the studio balked at the finished product. Paramount ordered him to cut the film by 30 minutes and tone down some of the violence. Anderson said he didn't have enough time for a proper re-edit and believes he cut out 10 minutes too much. And I also kind of felt this. I also kind of felt that there was stuff that was missing that would make it more horrifying. It's like, I know that horror movies aren't my thing, but I know what horrifies me. And I don't think this movie was sufficiently horrifying. And like, it didn't have to be gory, but there did have to be tension. And there was a suspicious lack of tension that I felt as I watched the movie. So there should have been more of that. Maybe if there was a little bit more backstory to some of the characters, like you see some hints of backstory, but you don't really know, like you don't really get a whole lot. Like you kind of get the story of the captain and how he lost a crew member. And you kind of get the story of, one of the lieutenants, and like she wants to be with her son, but she can't be with her son because of this stupid mission. And then there's one scene where you see DJ, the doctor, and he's got this scar going down the middle of his chest. You have no idea. They never explain what this scar is for. But I feel like if they were allowed to expound on it, then we would know why the scar was there. And maybe it would be a traumatic event. And then maybe it would be connected to how he was killed in the movie, like how he was tortured and killed. But it's like, maybe that would explain a fear that he had. Maybe it would explain why he was a medical doctor. But like, we don't get that. There's the XO, we don't really know anything about her. We don't know anything about the pilot. I mean, as characters go, they're developed enough, but we don't get a lot with the characters. And so there's not a lot of tension that that is offered because we don't really know enough about them for the tension to be relevant, I guess. So yeah, a few more minutes would have been appreciated. And there's a reason why he felt like he didn't have enough time to cut it properly. I'll get into that later, but right now I want to say something about the script. The script was originally described. Well, it originally described the gateway machine. The gateway machine is what I've been calling the singularity or the black hole. They call it the gateway in the movie. So the gateway machine was described as being as smooth and featureless as a black orb. It was 10 meters or nearly 33 feet in diameter and suspended in midair between large rotating mechanical arms. It also was said to contain a stable black hole within it at all times, which the ship used as a power source, as opposed to briefly creating a temporary one as depicted in the movie. So in the movie, the black hole wasn't on all the time. It was supposed to be off. At one point, it came on by itself, but then Dr. Weir, back when he was normal, kept screaming about how that was impossible. The black hole just can't come on by itself. But somehow it did. And that's what got the engineer of the Lewis and Clark. That's what happened in the movie. But as it looks in the movie, Paul Anderson decided to redesign it to involve interlocking circles as an homage to the puzzle box in Hellraiser that came out in 1987, which served as an inspiration. The visual design of this gateway machine, which transports the original crew to hell, is based on a biblically accurate depiction of a heavenly creature called an Ophanim, as described in Ezekiel chapter 11, verses 15 to 21. It's a freaky thing. If you read Ezekiel, it's describing these wheels, and these wheels are four wheels that are perpendicular in each other, and they're also inside one another, and they're always kind of turning. And the most interesting thing about these wheels is that they have eyes on the outside of the rim, and that is the look and feel that they were trying to achieve when they designed the gateway device. Up next, although the film met with mostly negative reviews and a disappointing box office result at the time of its release, it amassed a considerable cult following over the years. The director, Paul Anderson, said that this movie's cult status was predicted to him years before by none other than Kurt Russell. Anderson screened Event Horizon before they started work on the movie Soldier that came out in 1998. And Russell said, I'm going to attempt my best Kurt Russell impression. Russell said, "Forget about what this movie is doing now. In 15 years' time, this is going to be the movie you're glad you made." Okay, I admit that's not a great impression. But anyway, that's what Kurt Russell said, and Russell was correct. And this movie did become a huge cult classic. The filming of the gravity drive on Fire caused the gravity drive. That's what I'm calling the singularity or the gateway. This thing has so many names. So the filming of the gravity drive on Fire caused a real fire that partially destroyed the set. A different set had to be built quickly while the old one was being repaired. In the end, the repaired set was only used for an additional day of filming. The spacesuits worn by the actors weighed 65 pounds. I want you to keep this in mind. This is a pretend thing that they're doing. They're playing pretend. But in their endeavor to play pretend, they want to put on these costumes that weigh 65 pounds or 30 kilograms. I don't understand why that was necessary. You're playing pretend. I don't think that was necessary, but they did. And it could hurt them. So these things weighed around 65 pounds or 30 kilograms each. Lawrence Fishburne named his Doris for no particular reason. Due to the weight, standing upright in them for longer periods could lead to back injury, but sitting down was not possible either due to the backpack. Special hanging poles were constructed on the set so the actors could rest on them between takes. The writer, Philip Eisner, visited the set while the spacesuit sequences were being filmed. Lawrence Fishburne stopped between takes, point at Eisner, and shout, mocking angrily, You, Eisner, you did this to me. Yes, he did. I don't understand why that was necessary. Up next, the Visions from Hell. The ship's video log were inspired by works from 16th century Renaissance painter Hieronymus Bosch and Peter Bruegel. I hope I pronounced those correctly. Don't at me. Anyways, Paul Anderson saw these paintings while he was touring art galleries with his production designer. Anderson was fascinated by these paintings as the makers clearly believe in the reality of hell as the complete antithesis of heaven. And the images they created were terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Now, I've seen some of these paintings. I had to do a quick, Google search. And the Bosch paintings were definitely, you could see the scene, what they were doing. You could see how some of the scenes were inspired by the Bosch paintings. You could see that. Not so much with Bruegel. Bruegel was a little bit more whimsical, and maybe I just glanced at them. I didn't look, I didn't do a deep dive into their work. I just kind of glanced at them, and Bruegel was not as terrifying. They were more whimsical than they were terrifying, and at the same time a little bit disturbing. I would say that both of these artists did some really disturbing work, and that was the atmosphere that Anderson was going for. Anderson said that these scenes were filmed at the end of production with a smaller unit, so studio executives probably never bothered to screen them beforehand, thinking that they were just insert shots. He stated that when the executives saw a screening of a rough edit, they were very shocked, and some of them fainted. This is a studio that made Star Trek, so I think they kind of thought it was like Star Trek again, but with a bit more violence or something. I don't think they were really expecting what they got. Okay, that's a really bad impression of Paul Anderson. I know that he's British, or I think that he is. He doesn't sound like that. But I wanted to show, I just changed my voice for the sake of quotation. Up next, some spacesuits have flags showing hypothetical future political changes on Earth. Characters portrayed by British actors wear a European Union flag with 22 stars replacing the Union Jack. The movie predates the UK's 2016 vote to leave the European Union. Sir Sam Neill character, well, actually, before I get into what Sam Neill was doing, what's interesting is that even though this predates 2016, this movie takes place in 2047. So it's not beyond the pale that the UK would rejoin the European Union. So back to Sam Neill. Sir Sam Neill's character wears a modified Australian flag with the Union Jack removed from the top left-hand corner and an Aboriginal flag in its place at his request. So that was kind of neat. Up next, the shot where Sam Neill stares out of a window, which then pulls back to reveal he's on the deck of a spaceship orbiting Earth, it's not actually a spaceship, it's a space station. It's orbiting Earth. It took the digital special effects house Cinesite 10 weeks to achieve. The shot lasts for 45 seconds. So, wow, back in 1997, when you wanted a visual effects shot, if you wanted a digital shot, if you wanted CGI, you had to work for it. Up next, from green light to completion, The film took 10 months, an unusually short time for such a complex and effects-driven film. Due to the rushed production, filming was hard on the crew, but the actors also had their own problems. Jolie Richardson later said that the script was incomprehensible and that none of the actors really understood it or the nature of the other dimension, quote unquote. Extensive special effects work, like bulky suits, fake blood, and makeup took a toll on the cast, and there were so many accidents on set, such as Richardson and Neal being knocked out by a badly timed explosion and several injuries, that they felt that the movie itself was cursed. All in all, Richardson said that it wasn't such a fun project, though a lot of people were lovely. That is very diplomatic. Finally, having just done a PG-13 movie, Mortal Kombat, from 1995, Mr. Anderson was very keen to do something more mature and gruesome. That's why he turned down the chance to direct the first X-Men and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Though I kind of wished that he had done Mortal Kombat Annihilation. It was such a disappointment. So that's it for the trivia. And now we're going to talk about what the critics thought. All right. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave this an expected 34%, and audience score was 61%. And that is consistent with IMDb reviews, which has it at 6.6 out of 10. So Sean Axmaker from Stream On Demand wrote, "The screenplay is not nearly as inventive as the production design, and it turns into a woefully inconsistent psychic monster movie that sacrifices mood for tepid shocks." You know what? I would kind of agree with them. The screenplay is not as good as the production design. I did list that as one of my favorite things about it. The production design was on point. I agree with that. And I wish the script had kept up with it. Christy Strauss from Film Inquiry wrote, "Since its release 25 years ago, it has taken on quite the following, and for many, it is because of its spectacularly disturbing mashup of camp and horror, sci-fi, and, well, Sam Neill." So yeah, I think that's also true. This film has definitely stood up the test of time. Leah Rosen from People Magazine wrote, "Despite a few nifty special effects, this sci-fi horror film, in which grisly things happen to a space crew after its members board an abandoned ship, is a boring and blood-soaked mess." You know, I can see how she would feel that way. I've got no notes. And finally, we have Heather Wixson from Daily Dead. She wrote, "Event Horizon feels like a once-in-a-lifetime cinematic excursion in sci-fi and pure, unfiltered horror that rarely ever comes along out of the studio system." You know what? It could have been a better sci-fi horror. I feel that way about this one. I was definitely looking forward to it. And I can see why she said this, because it's so close to something that was great. It's like it just missed the mark. It's kind of like a combination of The Shining and The Black Hole, the Disney movie called The Black Hole. It's got similar premises to the Disney film The Black Hole. It does involve a black hole. It does involve visions of hell. And it does involve people turning on each other. It has similar elements. But the thing is, like I said, when I was talking about what I was looking for in a horror movie, I really was looking for the tension. So finally, Event Horizon is, as of this recording, available on streaming. That's it for today. Next week, I'm going to lighten the mood with an emotional road trip about long lost brothers. This uplifting, fun-loving movie, Rain Man. You can follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Backlick Cinema. Don't forget you can contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. For example, you can let me know, did you like the haiku at the beginning of this episode? Let me know. And please leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Or I guess on Spotify, it's just a star, not 5 stars. You get my message. You leave a review, I'll read them on the show. How about that? So one last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe. Share a movie from yesteryear with your family. Hug your loved ones. And if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.